In a quiet corner of the city, under the cover of darkness, Lena nervously made her way down a winding alleyway. The smell of incense and strange herbs wafted through the air as she approached a small, unmarked door. She hesitated, gripping the handle with trembling hands. Behind it was Papa John, a renowned voodoo priest, known for his abilities to bend fate and twist the desires of men. Lena had everything at stake. Her sugar daddy, Marcus, a wealthy businessman, had started to drift away, his affections waning as a younger woman entered his life. Desperate to hold on to the luxurious life he provided, Lena sought help where others feared to tread. Inside, the atmosphere was heavy with the weight of unseen spirits. Candles flickered, casting eerie shadows across the walls, filled with talismans, bones, and strange symbols. Papa Jean sat calmly, his dark eyes reflecting wisdom and danger. "What you seek comes with a cost," he rasped, his voice like the crackling of dried leaves. "To keep his love, you must bind him. But remember, child, voodoo's price is more than you can imagine." Lena, driven by fear of losing her status, agreed, willing to sacrifice anything to keep Marcus. With each word of the ritual, with each drop of her own blood, the forces of the unseen world closed in. Papa Jean tied knots with threads soaked in oils, whispering chants in a forgotten tongue. Lena could feel the pull of magic, but she didn't know what it would take from her. Lena had always turned heads, her beauty, a rare blend of grace and allure. With her smooth caramel skin, striking green eyes, and a charm that left men in her wake, she never wanted for attention. But Marcus was different. He wasn't just captivated by her beauty. He opened the doors to a world she could only dream of: luxury, power, and influence. He was a wealthy businessman, older but refined, and Lena had fallen into a life of privilege as his cherished companion. But now, things were changing. Lena noticed the subtle shift in Marcus's attention. His business dinners became more frequent, and his texts less so. The latest rumor of a younger woman, a model half her age, stung her pride and set a fire in her heart. Desperation clawed at her, and she couldn't stand the thought of losing him, not when she'd invested so much. In a dimly lit room, surrounded by flickering candles, Lena stood before Papa Jean, the famed voodoo priest of the city. His shop, hidden in the back streets, was a place whispered about only in hushed tones. He was her last hope. "I want him bound to me," she whispered, her voice steady, but her heart racing. "I want Marcus to need me, to never look at another woman again." Papa Jean's weathered face remained impassive as he surveyed her. "You must be sure, child. Voodoo binds the heart, but it also chains the soul. There will be consequences." Lena's green eyes flashed with determination. "I'm ready." Papa Jean nodded solemnly, gathering the sacred ingredients. A lock of Marcus's hair she had stolen, a photograph of them together, a vial of her own blood. The air in the room grew thick with energy as he began chanting in an ancient tongue, his words calling upon spirits older than time itself. As the ritual progressed, Lena felt an invisible force wrap around her, tightening with each of Papa Jean's chants. A large black candle burned before her, and as its flame flickered, she envisioned Marcus, helpless, consumed by his need for her, unable to break free. With a final chant, Papa Jean tied a string around a small doll made in Marcus's likeness, binding it with intricate knots. "He is yours," he said quietly. "But remember, once a man is bound, his desires will twist into obsession. You may get more than what you ask for." Days later, the change was immediate and dramatic. Marcus was back, showering Lena with gifts and attention, calling her constantly, cancelling meetings just to spend time with her. At first, it felt like a dream. He couldn't keep his hands off her. His eyes were always on her, and Lena basked in the glow of his relentless affection. She felt powerful, desired, irreplaceable. But as the weeks passed, Marcus's love began to darken. His devotion turned possessive, suffocating. He grew jealous of any man who even looked at her. His calls became incessant, and his temper flared if she didn't respond immediately. He watched her every move, his obsession growing stronger by the day. Lena had gotten what she wanted, but at a cost. She now realized the depth of the spell's power, the warning Papa John had given her echoing in her mind. Marcus wasn't just bound to her. He was controlled by her, consumed by an unnatural force, one that twisted love into something dangerous. And now, Lena found herself a prisoner of the very spell she had cast. Marcus sat in his office, the air around him thick with the scent of her, Lena. The fragrance of her perfume, mingled with something deeper, something intoxicating, hung in the room like an invisible fog. He could still smell her on the pair of panties she had accidentally left on his desk. It wasn't just an accident, of course. It was part of the spell she had cast. A spell he wasn't aware of, yet one that gripped his very soul. He leaned back in his chair, loosening his tie, but it didn't ease the tension building inside him. His thoughts raced, but they all led back to her. He could barely focus on his business, on his meetings, or even on his wife. His life, once orderly and controlled, had fallen into chaos since Lena's presence had taken root in his mind, like a vine wrapping tighter with every passing day. And there, lying before him, were her panties, silky, black, and deliberately left behind. They were no ordinary garment. These carried the scent that was now woven into his thoughts, into his very being. It was Lena's essence, both physical and mystical, a part of the voodoo ritual she had performed. Without knowing why, Marcus found himself drawn to them, lifting them to his face. The soft fabric brushed his skin, and her scent filled his senses, overwhelming him with desire. He whispered her name. Lena. It slipped from his lips like a prayer, an offering to the fire burning inside him. His hands trembled as he held the delicate fabric to his nose, breathing in her scent like a man starved. He closed his eyes, and all he could see was her curves, her smile, her intoxicating beauty. The thought of her, the feel of her body pressed against his, drove him wild with need. Marcus was no longer the powerful businessman he once was. His mind belonged to Lena. His wife, Diane, barely registered in his thoughts anymore. At home, Diane's presence felt distant, like a shadow. Even when she spoke to him, all Marcus could think about was Lena. He was a man obsessed. In the quiet moments at work, he would murmur her name under his breath, unconsciously running his fingers over the fabric of her panties that he kept hidden in his desk drawer. Each time he touched them, it was as if a spark ignited inside him, making his desire for her burn hotter, fiercer. He wanted her, needed her, more than he had ever needed anything in his life. The spell was working far beyond Lena's intentions. The voodoo had tied Marcus's soul to hers, not just in devotion, but in a twisted obsession. Her scent lingered on his clothes, in his office, in his thoughts. At night, when Diane lay next to him in bed, he couldn't stand the sight of her. It wasn't Diane he wanted anymore, it was Lena. He craved her with a hunger that no one else could satisfy. Marcus no longer cared about the consequences. Lena had him in her grasp, and he wasn't sure he wanted to escape. At Lena's apartment, she awaited him, her eyes glowing with the power she knew she now held over him. She knew the spell had worked far better than she could have imagined. She didn't need to call Marcus anymore. He came to her like a moth to the flame, powerless to resist. Her lips curled into a sly smile, as she watched him enter, desperate, driven by forces beyond his control. "What took you so long?" she teased, her voice dripping with seduction. Marcus didn't answer. He didn't need to. He crossed the room, eyes locked on her, and whispered her name one more time. Lena. Her beauty and cunning, combined with the voodoo spell she'd cast, had turned Marcus into a puppet dancing to her tune. He had showered her with wealth, gifts, and the kind of life she had always dreamed of. His obsession had drained him, mentally, emotionally, and financially. Lena, with her flawless skin, mesmerizing green eyes, and seductive charm, had no shortage of admirers, all eager to fall at her feet. And she knew how to play the game, how to get inside their heads, how to make them want her more than anything. When he saw Lena cozying up to another rich businessman at one of the lavish parties she attended without him, something snapped. His mind, already fragile from the spell, shattered under the weight of betrayal. All the love, obsession, and devotion he had poured into Lena had been for nothing. She never cared for him. He was just another mark, another man falling prey to a beautiful young woman who only wanted his money. Marcus, lost in his obsession with Lena, had neglected everything: his family, his responsibilities, his very sanity. Diane had seen the signs for a while, but when Marcus started losing their savings, draining their accounts to fund Lena's extravagant lifestyle, she knew it was over. She filed for divorce. Diane took the kids, the house, and what was left of the money. Marcus, once a respected businessman, was now penniless, stripped of everything he had worked for. Skid Row, Los Angeles. Marcus wandered the streets, his mind a fragmented mess of memories and regrets. He couldn't understand how he had fallen so far, how the man who once owned skyscrapers was now begging for change on the streets. As he wandered through the crowded streets of Skid Row, his thoughts still returned to Lena. He muttered her name under his breath. Even now, even after everything she had done, he hated her, but he couldn't stop thinking about her. The spell she had cast still lingered in his mind like a poison, taunting him, making him wonder if it had all been real. His once pristine shoes were now worn and dirty, his hands rough from panhandling. He stood on a street corner, holding out a battered cup, hoping for spare change from strangers who passed by without a second glance. And in the darkest hours of the night, when he curled up in a corner of the shelter, the memories would come back. The luxury, the power, the life he once had. Meanwhile, Lena moved on without a second thought. She had her sights set on her next sugar daddy, another wealthy man who would fall for her charms, unaware of the dark forces she used to bend men to her will. She didn't care about the destruction she left behind, only about what came next: more wealth, more power, and more men wrapped around her finger. Marcus, a broken man, was just one more victim in her long line of conquests. Now, he was nothing more than a forgotten soul on the streets of Los Angeles, whispering her name into the wind, still longing for the woman who had destroyed his life.